How's it going, everybody? Chris here. Thank you for tuning in to Wicked Repairs. Today I have a 2007 Ford Edge. This will be same for all of the edges of this model, this style, besides the newer body style. And we're going to be replacing the wheel bearing assembly, so the whole hub assembly, as well as the control arms in the front. So I already did the driver's side, now I'm on to the passenger side, so figured I'd make a little video and see if it might help somebody. So let's go and get down to it. I'm going to put the jack underneath it. It's already underneath. I'm going to jack it up, put a jack stand underneath it, get it all secured and safe. And we're going to go to town. We're going to take off the wheel first, then the brake caliper, then pop off the rotor, and show you everything else we got to do. So once you get the wheel off, it should basically look like this. Before I really go do anything else, I'm going to go through and I'm going to spray WD-40, any type of penetrating lubricant all over the nuts and bolts that need to come off, just to let it sit and soak a little bit and help with hopefully making it a little easier to break everything loose. And then we're going to take off the two 19mm bolts that hold on the brake caliper, and we're going to take off the brake caliper, and I'm going to use a strap to run through here, and I'm going to tie it up to here so it's not hanging. We don't want any stress on the brake cable, so we're going to take that off here. You could also take this off here if you like. This does get in the way of this bolt, but you can slightly bend it out of the way too to get that bolt out. But definitely recommend putting the brake caliper, when you take it off, securing it up to the coil and the shock. That way, it's kind of suspended and there's no tension on the brake hose. So as you can see, I put the strap right here. I just have it hanging on the coil, and like I said, it's nice and free. Nothing's tight or bound or anything like that. You're just doing this just to hold the caliper out of the way and keep it from dangling down. And if it's low enough on your vehicle that you can rest it on the floor, on the ground, fine. And we're going to remove the rotor. Sometimes they can be a bear to take off. You want to smack the rotor here with a hammer, and slightly try to move it. This one is very free moving, so we got no problem taking this one off. See the rust that forms in there. I mean, that's why you would seize normally and be stuck on there. When I put them back together, I usually put a little never seize on here to try to help with the rotors coming off. Alright, so the next thing I popped off was the bolt for the ABS sensor. I sprayed that too. When I did the driver's side, the bolt actually broke right away, which I wasn't worried about because I'm replacing this whole entire hub bearing assembly. So I wasn't worried about it. The only thing I had to do was get a new bolt that fit in, which I have plenty of miscellaneous bolts that fit in perfect. When you take this off, you want to be careful. If you can do it by hand like I just did, definitely do that. Sometimes you need to put like a pair of pliers on here and firmly hold without being too tight that you don't crush it, and you got to twist it a little bit. And I would just clean this off lightly. All I do is use like a rag just to wipe any debris off, and just kind of tuck the ABS sensor right out of the way where it's not going to get pinched, crushed, broken, anything like that. Next thing I'm going to take off is the cotter pin for the tie rod end, and we're going to take off that nut there, and then we're also going to remove the nut and bolt for the lower ball joint. Then I'm just going to loosen up these here, and I'm going to loosen up the sway bar link ends as well. So let's go ahead and do that. That'll be your next steps. Now what I do to get the tie rod end off here, basically I sprayed it with penetrating lubricant. I put the nut back on, just finger tight, and I'm going to use a punch or a chisel or whatever and stick it right in the center and just hit that with a hammer. It should pop it right off. If it doesn't, hit it a few times, it'll come off, but I do this just to protect the threads. That way I don't slip with the punch or chisel, whatever you're hitting with, and rub it along the threads and ruin it. Then you have to replace your tie rod end. So this typically works for me all the time. So it took me about 4 hits, and you can see that the nut is right up against there now, and it's free moving. All you have to do is spin the nut off by hand, set the nut to the side, or if you want, that way you don't get confused, although this is the only castle nut, you can put it right on there just to keep it safe from rolling out of the way or falling off your workbench, anything like that. And that's what I do to take that off. So we'll take off the rest of the hardware we need here. Now when you take the nut off for the sway bar links, right on the inside of the sway bar link, there is a nut here, 11/16 wrench. You're going to want to put on there to hold it while you take off this nut. Same with the bottom. I've taken off this one completely. I've loosened this one, so it's basically coming off in a second. Then we're going to get the bottom here for the ball joint, and we'll be able to, and then the center nut here for the axle, we'll be able to remove the hub assembly. So that's basically what it looks like without the wheel hub assembly. Now I'm going to be replacing the lower control arm. If you're not replacing the control arm, you're just doing the hub assembly, you just put everything back in the way that it came off. And if you're replacing the control arm, you basically, you don't have to remove, actually you do have to remove everything, I'm sorry. You have to remove everything just the same to remove the control arm. And then it's just 3 more bolts to remove the control arm. So right underneath here, there's 2 15mm bolts that run through into the nuts that are onto the control arm. And then in the very front, basically right in here, is an 18mm bolt that comes through on your front portion of your control arm. You're going to have to get that from the front of the vehicle. Now, one thing I happened to notice when I was under here right now is that this hose right here is rubbing right against the case. And it's not worn through yet, but the hose is worn. So I'm going to put something here to protect that from happening any further. But you might want to look at that while you're in there. And then I just push this bracket out of the way a little bit so I can have more leeway for this hose. And you can see the nut, the bolt is right there. So it's an 18mm bolt. So we're going to take that off. And then we're going to take these 2 15mm bolts right out of here and then pull the control arm off. I just want to note also, the reason why I'm replacing the control arms is because as I'm hitting bumps, I'm getting a real judder, you know, big bang that's going on with it, and everything's blown out inside here. If you take a pry bar and you push, you can see all the movement. And I just removed the bolts, and look at that, it's not even round anymore. That's crazy. The control arms do come with new hardware. If you don't have a kit that comes with new hardware, I suggest getting new hardware, because if yours looks like that, that is not reusable at all. Not even close. The other one was in overall pretty good condition, you know, but look at the difference in that. Holy cow. Big problems. All right. Well, we got the control arm off, and it came off really relatively easy, very easy actually. I got the new control arm here. I put a sway bar end link on here already. It's loose, of course. I don't have it tight, but we'll tighten it up when it's back on. And just reverse process from here. We're gonna put the control arm on. What I'm gonna do is, I'm a big believer on Never Seez. You do want to put a little bit of blue Loctite on the bolts that go into here. Same with this one. But I'm also going to take Never Seez, and I'm just going to put it kind of a little bit around here, and a little bit just on the faces of these mounts, just to keep everything from, you know, corroding, you know, over time. And then we'll put everything back together, and that's basically it. So we got the lower control arm on, piece of cake to put it on. The 2 bolts in here and 1 in the front, put them all in. Basically how I do it is I put the 2 in the back in, just kind of finger tight. If you need to use a socket, you know, and a ratchet to apply some pressure and turn to catch the threads, do that, but do it slowly. Don't use the impact gun, that way they don't cross thread. Same thing with the front. Go by hand, ratchet and some pressure, and find the hole properly, line it up, get it to catch threads. I just drive all those in by hand. I don't even use an impact gun. You can once they catch enough threads, but I just did them by hand, tighten them up real good. Now I'm going to go get the hub assembly, and we're going to start to put the hub assembly on. So these 2 bolts can be a little tricky getting in. When you're putting them in, I use a screwdriver and try to use that as like a pin to line up the holes, get the bolts in. And this could be a pain in the butt too. And if you're having trouble with getting the sway bar link in, one thing you can do is right here, lift up with a jack, and it will compress your shock and bring up the whole hub assembly, and it will relieve tension on this, and bring it closer so that you can pop it in place. You see, I'll put a little bit of blue Loctite here. I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to get the tie rod end in, tighten that up, tighten up the sway bar links, get the bolt into here for the lower joint here on the control arm, and then we're going to get the brake rotor on and caliper on and finish putting this back together. Call it a day. Alright, we've got everything tight. Just have to put the ABS sensor on, put the brake rotor on, put the brake caliper on. One thing I wanted to point out, and you should always do, is if you have a bolt that has a castle nut with a cotter pin, make sure you always replace your cotter pins. Be careful. Don't cut yourself. I almost did. I did not, but I almost did. And then we're going to get the ABS sensor in here, rotor on, caliper on, wheel on, and we'll be good to go. Well, that's it. It's been done for a little while, but I did take it for a test ride. Everything's great on it now. No more wheel bearing noise. Clunking still a little bit, probably because she's just an old machine, old vehicle now, but it's much quieter than it was. Running real smooth, feels nice and tight. I did have an ABS sensor light come on, and I checked it, and it's the passenger rear wheel ABS sensor, so I guess that will be next. So see you soon. Thank you for watching. I hope this video helped you.